Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and we're back for the final piece of the angler personas. And this one asks, are you the Zen Angler? And it's kind of interesting that they finish with this one, as we started with the one that said, are you an average angler? And the reason I say it's interesting is that there's a lot of overlap with the average angler. So this one has got a completely different motivation behind why they go fishing and what they go fishing for than any of the others that we've talked about, that being the traditionalist or the friendly fisherman or the social dabbler or the adventurous angler and some of the other profiles. And interestingly enough, for this one I've actually chosen that empty hook on the left there. I met a fellow once, goes back a while, but I would classify him as a traditional Zen angler. I asked him, I saw him around a local pond. He had a little cork out there fishing for some crappie, and I asked him what kind of bait he was using. He said none. He said if I put any bait on the hook, then I got to go work to catch a fish, and I just enjoy it here. And that's kind of the epitome of what a Zen angler is. They're not necessarily about catching a lot of fish or the biggest fish or the adventure of the fish. It's really motivated by a couple of other things, and that's what we're going to go talk about here. We're doing this as a series on the business of fishing and how fishing manufacturers and distributors and retailers target or profile the various types of anglers, who buys what from whom, and who's selling what to what kinds of groups. And we've seen a pretty diverse population out there, something that I see when I am involved in the selling of some fishing equipment. Lots of different motivations, lots of different types of people, lots of different folks seeking different types of tackle and equipment for various reasons. But let's just spend a moment with these Zen anglers then. The Zen angler is less about the catching of the fish and more about the chance to get outside, enjoy the outdoors, relax, and disengage from the stress of everyday life. So you kind of see a little bit about what's driving or what's motivating them. And interestingly enough, 1 in 4 folks that fish actually fall into this category. So that's a fairly high number. If you look at the Zen angler, they're primarily interested in fishing just to get away and relax and spend the time outdoors. More so than any others, they tend to be solitary anglers. In other words, we talked about the friendly fisher, the one that's kind of going along, wants to engage the family and kind of make it a communal exercise. We've talked about the social dabbler who may not go by themselves, but if they're invited, will certainly attend. Well, the Zen angler is one that, like that fellow that I found without that bait on the hook, just kind of being somewhat of a loner and just getting out there to relax, enjoy the outdoors, and they chose fishing as a way of doing that. If you look at the profiles of these folks, well, there's not much difference other than, surprisingly, they tend to be more experienced anglers. So if you look at the experience level that they would classify themselves, it's a 50-50 split between beginner, novice, and intermediate, advanced, and expert. So a lot of these folks think of themselves as intermediate in the sense of knowing how to fish, where to fish, and what to fish for, what types of baits and lures to use, and the like. And then, of course, the advanced or the expert consider themselves well beyond that. But in this case, interestingly enough, the Zen angler is not interested in mentoring people. They're not interested in passing the tradition down. They're really about just getting away and enjoying the relaxation behind that. If you look at the population, as I mentioned, it falls very close to the averages. There's no statistical differences in terms of how they first became interested in fishing, where they fish, who introduced them to fish, although most of the time it would be a parent or a family member or a friend of a family member, but that's not different than the average or any of the others. Most of them do expect to fish next year, about 80%, But interestingly enough, only about 60% of them actually went fishing last year. So I think in their minds it's a great thing, and they'd like to get out and they'd like to relax and they'd like to remove themselves from the stress. But more plan to do it than maybe actually do it. It's all about rest and relaxation and doing that. And when you look at what they consider in terms of fishing, it's lack of crowds and the scenic beauty. So they're very much about where they're going as much as what they're going for. They are interested in easy access. They'd like it to be close to home, of course. They can just kind of skip out. And of course, they'd like an abundance of fish, wouldn't we all, as we go fishing out there. When they're asked about what competes with them in terms of other activities filling their time, other outdoor recreational activities is a good one. Family obligation and work obligations, that's about the same as the average angler. And relaxing at home. So those are a little bit different than some of the other motivations that we've seen there. But if you ask them why they didn't go fishing last year, again, remember this, about 60 or 65% went fishing in the last year. So of the ones that didn't go fishing, some of them actually said nothing prevented me, I just didn't go. Some didn't have the right equipment, and some didn't have people to go with, which is kind of interesting because the profile says that it's a solitary angler. And what would encourage them to do more? Well, an invitation from a friend, also knowing a little bit more about how to fish. So they enjoy the activity, but maybe they could learn a little bit more, even though a high percentage of them classify themselves as an intermediate angler or better. Surprisingly, when you look at how many days they fished in the past year, almost every category, 1 day to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, they're all spread by 5 days, up to 50 days or more. Very even distribution across all of them. This is the only one I think that we see a very good cross-section of, there's nothing to categorize them that said they only go fishing a few times a year or they only go fishing a lot of times, but rather that they kind of split right across all of those categories. The where they fish is the same as the average angler in the sense of freshwater versus saltwater, about a 65-25 split there. And of course that's pretty much right on with the average angler. And most of them, about 90% fish with live bait or artificial bait and lures. So I don't think you find the Zen Angler on charter boats. You don't find them in crowded situations. You kind of find them out by themselves on a lake or stream. I would suspect, although I haven't seen it, that a large amount of these anglers may actually be fly fishermen, just kind of solitary out there by themselves enjoying the day. And one of those reasons I would suspect that is they rate very high in terms of trout as a species that they're targeting, more so than any others. Of course, as we've seen in these surveys in the past, a lot of folks fish bass, a lot of people fish catfish and perch, but interestingly enough, trout is one of the highest ones on this profile versus the others. And if you look at the profile of the fish on the saltwater side, a lot of them say it's from surf or beach. So there's a good preponderance of inshore activity and fish that you don't necessarily need to go on to a charter boat or some other kind of a group activity to get to. So this whole survey has been about how do you sell to the people? What can you sell them? What do they target in the Zen Angler from the folks that we've described? How much do they buy? What do they buy? And so on. So let's conclude this group by that. So about half of these folks have bought something fishing related in the last year, and it's kind of evenly split. About half of them have spent up to about $250, and about half of them have spent more than that. Very few of them have spent anything around $1,000 or so. From the products, they're traditionalists. They like the gear that they have. They're not interested in getting the latest and greatest stuff. They're perfectly happy with the rods and reels and the like that they have. Some of them have bought rods and reels in the last year. Nothing significant difference than, say, the friendly fisher or the social dabbler. And if you're a rod or a reel manufacturer, you're probably not targeting this group in terms of selling them the latest equipment, because they're quite happy with what they have. They have spent a lot on lures and bait and fishing line. That makes a whole lot of sense. That's what we should all be doing on an annual basis, particularly if they're fishing with bait and lures. And most of them will be buying from the outdoor specialty shop like a Bass Pro's or a Cabela's or General Sporting Goods. And then, of course, there is some that do go to the local bait and tackle shop as the time permits. But when asked what they bought in the last year, about half of them said they bought a reel, about half of them bought a rod. But remember, this is a half of a half, right? Because only half of them said that they purchased anything fishing related in the last year. So this is the type of person or individual that has kind of a tackle wallet, has some favorite lures in there, maybe has some artificial baits in there, has the old trusty in terms of the rod and reel, and is just looking to get away for a day, preferably to a nice place that's quiet, blocks the crowds, where they can just kind of hang out. So what do the retailers, what does the fishing industry target to sell to these folks? Well, they target to sell anything that can enhance that experience of relaxing, right? So I don't know if this is the guy who's buying the Yeti cooler or the upgraded camping chairs or what, but for the most part, if they do introduce fishing into the equation, it's not necessarily selling them the tackle that you or I might be interested in selling to them. They don't spend a lot of time on television or in reading magazines or on blogs or websites trying to figure out how to fish better or where to go for fishing or techniques or even researching the equipment themselves. And the only times that they are on, generally they'll read an online magazine, and they spend a lot of time on state fish and wildlife sites. So that's probably about the seasons, size limits, what's open for fishing, where to go, those kinds of things. And finally, what sources did I find influential in researching the fishing? Well, for the most part, it's like many of the others, and I mentioned these are very close to the averages. A friend or family is important, and also talking to the outdoor sellers, the retailers, whether it's the local bait and tackle shop or the local specialty shop like a Bass Pro or a Cabela's. So I ask you this, are you the Zen Angler? So we've talked about the different profiles. This one certainly fits a whole group of people and some of the ones that I know. And I ask you, are you that Zen? So I hope you've enjoyed this series. We've covered a lot of different profiles for the angler. I'll come back with one more that just kind of summarizes all of those personas. But if you are that, know where the fishing industry is targeting its sales at you, and understand that if you're trying to sell to this group, what appeals to them is the relaxation and the sheer enjoyment of the outdoors, and that fishing isn't necessarily the end result of what they're seeking. They're not necessarily going for the trophy fish. They're simply going out there to have a relaxing time in the environment. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, please like it. If you want to see more, please subscribe. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Please stay safe, be well, and keep watching.